Hi, my name is Tristan Bridges, and today I'm going to be talking about the advancements and records that have been made throughout the past 10 years within kinesiology and sports. So for 2010, the New Orleans Saints played the Indianapolis Colts in their very first Super Bowl and beat them 31-17. And this was kind of a huge deal because Hurricane Katrina had just hit and it had damaged the Superdome, and people were very concerned about the things that were going to take place afterwards regarding football and where it was going to happen. And so instead they moved and played in Baton Rouge and San Antonio. The UConn women, they had an 87 game streak, and they almost beat the NCAA men's game streak, which was 88 at the time, and they also won the 7th NCAA championship. Concussions became a big concern throughout 2010 because they became more prevalent and people noticed them more. And the concerns were raised after the suicide of Owen Thomas, who was a college football player, and the death of an 11-year-old, which both of them were related to concussions. So also in the NFL season in 2010, there were 4 concussions in the first week and 46 by mid-season. The NFL, because of this, decided that it was time to crack down on the rules and regulations regarding illegal hits and safety concerns. And that ranged all the way from the NFL level to the Pee Wee level. CTE scans, which is a neurodegeneration as a result of too many head injuries. This causes dementia and depression, which can lead to suicide, and this was becoming a big concern because it was also becoming more prevalent. And so people were advised to look for the symptoms such as memory loss, confusion, personality change, behavior change, and struggles with balance and motor skills. LeBron James had a huge decision to make in 2010. He was deciding whether he wanted to re-sign or sign with someone different. He had offers from the New York Knicks, the Chicago Bulls, and Miami Heat, and he finally announced in an hour-long press conference with ESPN that he was going to sign with Miami Heat. And Tiger Woods tanks in 2009, and 2010 was his comeback season, and by the end of it, he ended up being the highest paid athlete of the time. In 2011, we have specialization in kines, which basically in kines there's a bunch of sub-disciplines, and it was deciding whether or not they wanted to make it where there were more specific specializations. So the concerns with this was that there was going to be not enough room for the specializations that were already here to do what their work was. They would be limited and their ideas would be limited because they would not be able to have such a broad spectrum of what their job title included. In 2012, KT tape began to become really popular because of the Olympics at the time, and there were so many advertisements about it, but people began to wonder if it was false advertisement, and they didn't really know how to feel about the effects of KT tape and if it actually worked or not, so that brought up a ton of questions about KT tape. Jan Sherman, he had a spinocerebral degeneration, and basically he created, this man, John Hopkins, created a robotic arm, as you can see here, and it went into the brain cells and it got a 91.6% success rate, and they hoped eventually that it would be a wireless system, which we now have today to monitor brain activity. In 2013, there's the Boston Marathon bombing. In April, there were 2 homemade cooker bombs that were made, and they went off at the finish line, and 3 were killed, and 16 lost limbs, and there were tons of others that were injured. Eventually, there was a movie called Patriots Day that was made in memory for it. Kevin Ware, we've all seen this horrendous picture where his bone is sticking out of him because he landed awkwardly while trying to shoot a shot or block a shot. And it was one of the first fractures on TV that we'd seen for a major player, that the bone was protruding from the skin. And in 2014, counting calories became a big thing because the FDA really cracked down and said that there needed to be nutritional facts and calorie intake levels. That way people could monitor what they were putting in their bodies, and it wasn't so much of a surprise and a shocker that things were bad for them. So they had a little bit of a grace period where they were able to comply. So these should have all been changed by now, and as you can see on basically everything, there's nutrition labels and facts on the back, and that was created in 2014. Also, they were made bigger, bolder, and better, so they were made to attract your attention as the buyer, and people would be able to recognize it as one of the first things in helping them decide whether or not to buy something. Insured equals assurance. So 4 years after Obamacare, only 11.3% of Americans were uninsured. So he really helped to get it up there. And 7 in 10 say that they use the free healthcare, and 60% say that without it, healthcare would be too expensive. Monet Davis was one of the 2 girls to play in the 2014 Little League and the 18th to play overall. She was the 6th to get a hit and the first African American girl to see the World Series. She was the first female to play a game and win it, which this was a huge step for not only sports and kinesiology, but also feminism, because she was the first to break many of these records, and that was unheard of at the time. Lauryn Hill, she was a basketball player, and she was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor and given a little bit of time to live. She wanted to play in one college game, so the NCAA allowed them to start season early so that she would be able to make it before she passed away. And she was given a bunch of awards, and eventually she passed away not long after. In 2015, high school basketball, they changed 2 of their rules pretty majorly, and they were finally allowed to wear memorable little patches or some sort of way to recognize loved ones that had passed or loved ones that they just wanted to recognize. And they also changed the rules to where their undershirts, socks, and headbands all had to be the same color, and the color had to be school colors or neutral. The New England Patriots and Seattle Seahawks, they had Super Bowl 49, which was the most popular Super Bowl even till today. It was the most live streamed and the most watched, and it was the biggest Super Bowl that we've had. And 2016, Colin Kaepernick, he knelt during the national anthem, and this caused a lot of controversy in people deciding whether it was respectful or not, or if it was allowed or not. And Nike ended up picking him up, and they received a ton of backlash from it, but eventually, I mean, they still have tons of profits and people who supported, so Nike's still okay to this day. And Colin Kaepernick made a huge name in this scene that was taking place. Larry Nassar was the osteopathic physician for USA Gymnastics, and he was caught in a huge scandal of assaulting athletes, and it turns out that he assaulted 225 of them, and he was accused and put in prison for life. And Tom Brady is perhaps the greatest quarterback of all time. He has broken 54 NFL records and holds them still. He's been to the Super Bowl 9 times and won it 6 times. He's the oldest QB to go to a Super Bowl, and he's really close to breaking a couple of other records like the Pro Bowl and the most games started. And in 2017, doctor by the name of John Denog made a huge step in the process of reversing paralysis. He did a bunch of brain tests on monkeys first and then decided to make a micro radio to put inside of a human brain to be a communicator. So he took a huge step, and there's still tons of research going on about this today. In 2019, PT and OT changed to where they require a doctorate's degree. And the non-world record world record was beaten by Eliud Kipchoge. He had just a little bit under 2 hours of time. And he had pace setters, unreleased shoes, cyclists, wind blockade, 8-day schedule for best weathers, and the ideal course. So people looked up to him, and he still holds a record. Also, the kinesiology kinesiology department has decided to make the move to D1. So that's pretty huge for Tarleton, and it's sports related and kinesiology. So that's a great advancement and a great huge step on Tarleton's part. So that is all I have. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and I hope you have a nice day.